All right, guys, today we're going to continue with some of the oil leaks on this Vortec 5.7 liter V8 sitting inside this 98 Chevrolet Cheyenne. What we're going to take care of today are leaking oil cooler lines. If we come over here on the back side of the radiator, you can see what I'm talking about here. So we've got this line that comes out the top of the cooler, and it goes down. You can see it's very heavily caked up with oil. There's obviously no other source of oil in this vicinity, so this is 100% a problem with the crimp end of this hose. And of course, I don't know how well you can see it, but this all runs down, eventually runs down to the bottom part of the area, and then ends up getting blown all over the engine by the fan. The bottom line is also suspect. Now, what I like to do is replace these in pairs, even if I don't see any direct evidence. So I got enough direct evidence to condemn this one. We're going to end up changing them both. In order to do this repair, first thing we're going to do is we're going to reach back here and we're going to disconnect our hood lights so we don't run the power down, because we're going to have the hood up for a considerable amount of time here. I'm going to go grab a 10 millimeter and we're going to take out the 10 millimeter bolts that are up on top here. If we look down inside, we see that there's a couple more 10 millimeter bolts, one here and one over here, I believe. Looking for it. Maybe not. Yep, it's broken off. So there's supposed to be one over there. That's the other thing we're going to be doing today, is we're going to toss this particular upper cracked fan shroud. It's cracked here. It's missing that bolt over there. I think it's probably missing one on the other side. And we've got a much nicer one from the salvage yard that we're going to replace it with. So I'm going to go grab a 10 millimeter and I'm going to grab a small flathead screwdriver so we can pop this clip and we'll get started. All right, so we start with removing this battery cable, popping out of the upper fan shroud molding. And then we take a small flathead screwdriver, and on these clips, we just kind of work it in here, twist and lift. Right, that's all you have to do there. You can put this guy back behind the AC line right like that. Then we'll take our 10 millimeter and take these bolts out. All right, guys, we're going to come in here and get the ones that are on the side of the upper fan shroud. But first, some vehicles are going to have this axle vent. It's another one of these small clips, right? So you can see on this side here. Just stick this screwdriver right in there and give it a twist up. That releases this guy. Get him out of the way. And then we'll come down and we'll get that 10 millimeter. Now the other one's broken, so nothing we can do there. We're going to do the same thing on the other side. All right, with the two bolts on this side and the two bolts on this side and the bolts in the front out, you can remove the fan shroud, or the upper fan shroud rather, and set it aside. In our case, we're going to discard it and replace it with a better one. We'll show that later. All right, so now we got a much better view of our oil cooler line. And now we've got the kind of access to remove this fitting without touching this upper radiator hose, just the way I prefer to do it. Come in like this. Now we need to get at the lower one. So, you could bend this back and have access to that lower fitting right there. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and remove the lower because it's broken here, like we were talking about earlier. And I'm going to have to replace the upper anyway, so I got it off of a salvage yard vehicle. I took a nice set of both, so I'm going to end up replacing both the upper and the lower shroud while I do these hoses. So I'm going to remove this. It's held on by a 10 millimeter bolt here. You can see the thread sticking through there. We have to access it from underneath. And another one right here. And again, we have to access it from underneath. So we'll go underneath and we'll take those two 10s out. What we'll also have to do before we can actually pull it out, though, is the fan is in the way. And so we'll have to take the fan clutch and fan assembly off of the water pump pulley in order to pull this out. Now, when we do that, that'll give us excellent visibility to both of these hoses, routing all the way down underneath to the oil filter adapter, and then there's a little clip that secures them, and we'll be able to see that. So let's go underneath and get these two 10s out so we can have the... All right, guys, in order to get access, we're going to have to open up this access panel, and that's held on by a couple of 15 millimeter bolts, one here and one here. So we're going to work those off so that we can open it up and get access to what we need. Once you get the last bolt released, then this little guy tilts up and out of the way. Now we'll reposition the camera so we can see what's behind here. All right, guys, with the panel open, and you pan up in here, here's the passenger side 10mm right there. And here's the driver's side 10mm right there. Now these are easily accessible, but you're going to need to use 1/4 inch sockets and ratchets because of this cramped space. The best tool to get these bolts out, if you have it, is a 10mm box end that has a built-in ratchet. You can get by with a socket and ratchet, but this actually has the best clearance because of the cramped space that you've got under here. Guys, now we need to take this fan off and separate it from the water pump pulley. So I'm going to use a tool like this. There's a lot of different tools you can use. I'm just going to use this particular type. It holds on to one of the bolts and of the pulley and then rests against the other one. And I'm going to have a helper hold on to this breaker bar, this 1/2-inch breaker bar for that. And then we're going to slip in. It's got the flex on the breaker bar is going to slip around a little bit until we get the other tool in there. Just going to use an adjustable wrench on here. And then we're just going to pull them apart. All right, so we got that torque broke off. I don't think we need to have this other tool anymore. Let me get this out of the way. At this point, she should just spin off. There she goes. It's lefty-loosey, just like anything else. Long threading to do. All right, so there we go. She's off. Now what I wanted to show you down here, let me set this fan clutch assembly aside for a moment. We take our flashlight. So there's a couple of different tools you can use for this. You can see there's some holes, if you zoom in here, that are into the pulley on these late model small block Chevys like this Vortec V8. And the GM tool has got a couple of prongs that fit in here and then go above any one of these bolts, and that's what you can use to hold it. This tool that I was using is from Lyle. What he does is he grabs around one of the bolts and then rests on the flat of another one of the bolts. Another thing you can do if you don't want to have a special tool, although it's very hit or miss and it can take longer to get this guy off, you can put the breaker on the tensioner and increase the tension, and then by increasing the tension you basically are turning the serpentine belt into like a strap wrench, and then you can give a sharp whap with a dead blow hammer, and sometimes you can get it to come off that way. So there's a lot of ways to get this off. Point is, you got to get it off in order to remove the lower fan shroud. So let me get some of these tools out of the way. We'll pull the fan shroud out and we'll start getting these hoses disconnected. All right, now that we got the fan off, let's take this guy out. We got a little bit of debris here, so we're going to be a little bit more contorted than you might have to be. I just don't want to have all that in there. We can dump it in the grass over here. All right, now with that out of the way, there's our hoses. Nice and clear. Upper, lower. We're going to take these fittings off next. We're going to use a 20mm to get these off. Now, ideally, you'd want to put a line wrench on here. I don't have a 20mm line wrench, so I'm just going to be using a regular wrench for this. Now, you can, by the way, the other thing you want to check here, so we have absolutely no leakage whatsoever at these fittings, so we don't have a problem with the fittings, and we don't have a problem with the O-ring. And then taking a look at the lower hose while we're down here, you know, if we can get the flashlight to cooperate, you know, same kind of thing, right? There's absolutely nothing leaking from these guys. Now, when we loosen them, though, we may get some seepage. All right, so it doesn't take much to loosen them up. Just a couple of turns. These are big, heavy-duty fittings. Same thing down here. don't know, is the flashlight in your way? Can't ever tell if it's helping or hindering. Now it's definitely hindering because it's hindering me. You know, there's somebody who comes up with a flashlight that will stay where you want it, will become rich beyond their wildest imagination. All right. I'm just trying to get this to where, you know, I don't even have to have it on the flats all the way. That could tell me it's loose enough to get off by hand. So at this point, we can take these guys off by hand. Maybe, yep. Got a little bit tight on me near the end there. All right, that one's off. And that one's off. At this point, let's go underneath and disconnect it at the oil filter adapter end. All right, guys, we're down here underneath the vehicle, and you can see where the oil cooler lines come into the oil filter adapter. And in order to disconnect them, what we've got to do is we've got to get these little rubber, I guess I'll call them a sleeve, off so that we can remove a clip that's on here. Just if I can zoom in here for a minute. Kind of move the camera so you can see what I'm talking about here. Right there. These little black guys here, these guys are going to have to be worked off. And I'm going to have to get a longer screwdriver, I think, in order to fit that. If I can get this off without knocking the camera. Yep. This is going to come in from the top, so you guys don't get nauseous. All right. Just got to get this guy worked back first. Now these haven't been taken off in a long time, so they're on there pretty stiff. Just got to be patient with them. And there they go. So they'll slowly come off. And both of them are the same. I'm only going to show this one. See if I can come in from this side. And definitely, you know, get your eye protection on and don't be directly underneath this stuff. You're going to have all kinds of dirt, crud falling off. Almost got it off all the way. There we go. All right. So now with this guy off and out of the way, we can see there's like a little metal retaining clip on here. And to get that guy off, we're going to need a couple of different pick tools. Might just get a brush on here to get some of this debris off first, so that I can not have it falling all around me. Let me get some of that stuff out of the way so I can get a better view of this thing. Yeah, I'm going to get a little brush on here, guys, because I want to be able to get down directly on this. All right, guys, we're all set here. Get this crud out of the way. Now we can get underneath here, get a better view. Whoops, sorry about that. Now we can see where the edge of this clip is. We're going to work it off. There we go. So we get our pick underneath here. That's the hardest part of this, is to get the tool underneath the clip so that you can pop it off. Almost. There he goes. All right, and then we don't want it to go flying, so I might have to block your view for a second. Okay, so now we got that clip off. I'm kind of move it down out of the way of this transmission brace so you guys can see it. think I'm going to be able to, though. See if we can move the camera over. There we go. You guys can see. There's our clip right there. All right, so we're just going to work this guy off. Whoop, there he goes. He worked himself off. And we're going to do the same thing on the other hose, the other coolant line, and then we'll be able to pull those lines back out of the oil filter. All right, guys, now that you've got the two cooler lines disconnected from the oil filter adapter, we've got this bracket here, this plastic bracket that snaps into this metal bracket, right? Or maybe you call this a retainer. And all you need to do is come in with a pair of long nose pliers. Now this one here I think is kind of old and busted. Yours might even be missing. But you would come up here and you'd give it a squeeze right here. There's a lot of crud on it, so I know you can't really see. When we get it out, I'll zoom in. But you're going to give it a pinch. And when you give it a pinch, it'll allow you to push it out. All right, so if we pull it up here, you can get maybe a closer view of this. All right, so you're just going to push this out so that it lets go of that metal bracket. And now we're ready to take these two lines out. All right, guys, as you get ready to remove these lines from the cooler itself, just make sure that you're getting the little O-ring coming out. If you don't see the O-ring on the pipe, it's stuck inside. You're going to have to fish it out. You got to make sure you do that, because if you try to put two O-rings in there, you're going to have leaks galore. All right, so we got this guy out. We got this guy out down here. We're going to have a little bit of leaking until we get situated. But at this point now, we can grab both of these, and we can just fish the whole assembly out. All right, so here's what I was trying to show you in the earlier clip. This little guy here just snaps on to the pipes, and then he snaps on to that metal brace, kind of clips on. Now if you're missing this, yours is broken, I'll put the part number in the description. So we can see these lines were leaking very massively. I'm convinced now that both of them were leaking. I let this go for a while, probably let it go for too long. Now it made a bigger mess to have to clean up. Let's go take a look at our new ones that we're going to... All right, just a quick view from the service manual, guys, for this particular truck. So they talk about having a 90-degree angle pick. I used a slightly different one, but it's the same deal. They show you over here about getting underneath and lifting out the clip. And of course, remember to discard the clip. You need to put a new one on. And then they talk about pulling it out. I find that you have to wiggle it to let it go. If you find it's really rusted in there, you might put some pliers with nylon teeth so you don't scratch it on here and just kind of lever it out. But in my case, it wiggled right out. And then they talk to you about putting the pin in, or the clip in rather. And so what you're trying to do is those slots, after you get the yellow ring pushed in, you're trying to get these slots to line up with this curve, and this curve on the clip. And of course they give you some instructions here in text. They show you another view here. Obviously this is a lot easier when it's in your hand versus under the truck. And they talk to you about, let's see, a couple other things you might find useful. Pushing in and removing the pipes, the clearance that you want to see before you push this plastic cover over the clip. Here's another view here of it going in. Here's another view here after you've snapped the ring on to retain it. And then also they're telling you to make sure that this goes on all the way. And then we were able to push the black over it. That's another indication that that yellow paint, which I think here they're showing indicated in black in these pictures, but we saw in the actual lines it's yellow. That's where you want to get that all the way in there so that you can actually see this through these slots. You'll see the yellow paint. I think that the only other thing they're showing here, here they mention that they actually ensure that the yellow identification band on the tube is hidden within the quick connect fitting. A hidden yellow yellow identification band indicates proper joint sealing. So you definitely don't want to see it over here or something like that. And then if you happen to be changing the fittings, they mention what the torque is. We didn't change the fittings, but I'll show you that torque here in case you do. So that's it. Again, you need to use new fittings. I think they mention actually, just for you guys that are doubters, I believe they make an explicit comment about, you know, like here I mentioned, they say discard the retaining ring clip, and then during installation, do not reuse the existing retaining clips removed from the cooler line connector fittings. So you have to have new ones so that the spring tension on there is good and tight. So anyway, I just thought I'd show you this. It comes out of the 98 second edition service manual, which is fine for all these OBS GMT 400 type trucks. All right, guys, here's our replacement outlet line, a GM 151 12870. Now it'll be marked output or input depending on the lines. I've got a little rubber banded Ziploc bag here, so when we fish it in, we don't get any crap inside the line itself. And you can see there's a new plastic piece that'll go over the clip when we reinstall it. And it'll come with a new O-ring on the end. And then this one here is part number 151-12871. And this is the inlet. Same deal, right? Put something over here so you don't get any crap in there. And it'll have a new plastic piece that'll slide over the clip. And it had a new O-ring on it, but I think I just dropped it. So I need to go track that down. I just saw it just a few seconds ago. Must have knocked it off. But yeah, just make sure that you end up with an O-ring on the end. On these new ones, they're typically blue, but they might be black. So let me go find that O-ring and then we'll get this installed. All right, guys, let's put the outlet in first because that's the one that goes on the bottom. And again, remember to have something to keep the crud off the end. And we're just going to route it back down the way it came out. Sometimes, you might encounter some resistance with something. You might have to go underneath and see what it's hitting against. And then over on this side, again, just make sure your O-ring is okay. And then what I like to do is just get a little bit of the oil from inside, put it around the O-ring. And then go ahead and get this guy started by hand. Now, if he's not going in good, that probably means you don't have it seated properly. Now, once he starts going in by hand, you can grab your 20 millimeter wrench and go ahead and snug him up. And then what we'll do is we won't torque this guy. We'll just get him snugged up, and then we'll go through and make sure he's lined up at the end of the oil filter adapter, and then we'll put the inlet on top here. And then we'll go back and we'll come around and snug these, we'll torque these up, and then we'll go ahead and insert these and get them clipped in. So let's go ahead, we'll go underneath and we'll see how it lines up with the oil filter adapter. All right, guys, we found our O-ring, fortunately. If you end up losing yours or you need extras, I'll put a part number down in the description where you can pick these up. They're still available. So now let's go ahead and get the inlet line, which is the upper line, installed. So similar to the other one, we're going to fish it down here. We're going to fish it down where the other one goes. Now you might want to have a helper for these steps because you need to get both these lines, you need to get them fished in above the transmission brace. I'm kind of doing it by eye here, or by hand, and feeling for it, but you can always go back underneath and do that. So now we're going to put this guy into the oil cooler on the transmission. So just like the bottom one, let's see if I can get a little bit of oil out of here to lubricate our O-ring. Just a little bit will do up here. So we're just trying to get a little bit of the residual oil on our O-ring. And then just like we did with the lower, we're going to feed them in. And then we're going to hand start the 20 millimeter fitting. And we're going to put him down into position, right? He goes in this down direction. Let's fish our axle vent out of the way and get him over there. right, so you kind of hold him roughly where he's going to go. Get your 20mm wrench and just very lightly snug it up. We're not looking to be finished yet because we still have work to do underneath. We just want to stop any more residual leaks out of the cooler until we're done underneath. So once it's snug enough to hold it in position, we're done up here and we can return down to the cooler area and continue hooking things back up down there. All right, another part number you're going to need is this 15724727. When we install the new pipes, we're going to need to replace the retaining clips that hold them into the oil filter adapter. So when we go underneath, I'll show you how you get these on. Kind of just roll them on with your thumb. I'll also show you some pages from the service manual to help explain how that's done. So let's go on and get them installed. All right, guys, you can see that we've got our new clip installed on the outlet line. We haven't pushed this one in yet, right? Just got it kind of sitting there. And one of the things I want to point out to you, so if I can bring this one down here just a little bit, you can see if we zoom in, hopefully you can see, there's a yellow paint band that'll be on the end of these. It'll be in the inlet and the outlet. And the idea is that after you get the clip in, you just push this guy in until you don't see the yellow. And the yellow will end up disappearing underneath the slots where the clip is sitting in. Now I'm going to try to reposition this and show you me putting the inlet pipe clip in. Hopefully that's a good angle for you. So you've got 3 slots, right? So here's our new clip right here. And what we want to do with this clip is we want to get it inserted into the 3rd piece, right? Push it with our thumb and roll it around until it snaps in like that. Let me move the flashlight here so you can see a good view of how it is situated. Right, so now, lots of shadows in here, guys. Sorry, maybe this view, you can see it sitting in, sitting right inside that top notch, and then the 2 hooks are on the other notch. And then if we take our inlet line, push them back, just for a sec, get them lined up with that, we can again see that yellow paint mark. So I'm going to have a helper push the outlet line in here. Let's see if we can get a good view with the flashlight here of that one. All right, go ahead and push that in. Just kind of wiggle it. Push. Gotta give it a good hard push. There it goes. Now you heard it pop. That was it sliding in. So if we take a look at the inlet, just to compare for a moment. I'm trying to get this where it'll rest where you can see it there. Maybe, yeah, like that. Like that. So we can see here, right here in the upper left, the inlet pipe. It's got a bit of a flare to it. And what will happen is as you push it in, it'll push the clip out until the clip pops behind the shoulder, and that's what locks it into position. All right, so since we got the outlet done, we can go ahead and slide this black cover over. And the other thing, if you remember from the service manual, we want to make sure that we don't see any gap. So now we're going to take our inlet pipe, position it. Let's see if we can get you guys any better of a view here. That's probably a better view. Yep. There's lots of shadows. Just give me a second, folks. Maybe that position of the light. All right, let's go ahead and push that inlet pipe in until it snaps. And then once you're sure that it has snapped into position, and you can tell that by the fact that you can't see the yellow anymore, and you can tell that also in a secondary way by when you try to put this clip on, it won't snap in flush with the fitting. So as long as it snaps in flush with the fitting, you don't see any yellow, and you heard it snap, you're done. So let's go ahead and continue up with the rest of what we have to do. Guys, here's a printout just showing what we've been doing here, right? So we've got our 2 lines, we've got our clips that go into our oil filter adapter, and then we showed removing this little plastic retainer that goes into this metal bracket. Here's our O-rings on the ends of our lines, and the service manual also shows the factory did a little zip tie to keep these guys close together. With this point, we're ready to torque this down. So if we take a look here, we've got our clip in, and we're going to come in here with a 20 millimeter crowfoot, and we're going to get this guy to 18 foot-pounds. I already have done this, right? So I'm just double checking, or 25 Newton meters. Now once that's all done, we're going to clean this up with some brake clean. All around here, wherever you had dripping. We're going to do this all around the oil filter adapter where we connect the lines, all along where the lines run, along the oil pan, all along that bracket where we have the plastic retainer, because we got to get all the old mess off in order to be able to tell if we've fixed the leaks, right? So we'll let this sit and evaporate. We'll go ahead and fire the engine up without the fan on just to test for leaks, and then we'll put the rest of it together and come back. All right, guys, here I cleaned up that bracket that's used to hold the pipes. I guess it's called this a clip, and it attaches to that metal bracket. And we can see after we've cleaned it up that one of the prongs is broke off. So we're going to need to replace this part too. I'll put that link in the description, but just to show you the new part here, this is what it's supposed to look like, right? Kind of a slightly different design, maybe, because it's kind of squared off on top versus the original one. But the point is you're supposed to have 2 of these to hold it on. And the part number of that guy is 157-25347. So let's go ahead and snap him on and retain those pipes. All right, guys, we're going to snap it on the bottom one. Push it forward so it lines up with the hole in the bracket. And then we're going to get it to snap in the top one. All right, we get it snapped on the other pipe, and then we can push it down with a pry bar. Just to get it where it needs to be. Until we get both of those little tabs in there. Now, finally, we got that guy popped in. That was one of the last things we had to reassemble. Make sure he's nice and tight. And then we back out a little bit here, just like we saw on the parts diagram. Going to put a small zip tie right here, just like they did originally. We'll clip that tail off. Now we're ready to go back up and finish assembling up on top. We've got our shroud back on, top and bottom. Everything's clipped and bolted in. These 10 millimeters that hold the shroud all around, top and bottom. They're 71 inch-pounds, but I'd recommend you don't do that torque. This type of plastic's gotten too old, and when you torque it down, that's what causes it to crack, which is why we replaced it while we did this repair. But everything's done, and we've tightened everything up here, and we ran it, and we don't have any leaks, so we are done. I hope this helped you out. I hope you learned something. I hope it helped you save some money on how to do this particular type of repair. If it did, push that like button. Really appreciate it. And as always, thanks for watching.